It's time to step into the Coming Out Lounge, a cool, safe space to be true to your sexual self. With your host, Rick Clemens. Rick has helped hundreds of people come out of the closet, and now each week he's bringing you cool insights for loving and accepting yourself, boosting your self-confidence, and living a guilt-free, purpose-filled life on the other side of the closet doors. Cuddle up with yourself and get ready for heartwarming coming out stories, ideas for living authentically, and tips for being fully self-expressed. Now here's your host, Coming Out Coach Rick.
Hello, Closet Busters. It is time once again to stop the closet dwelling and to step out, step up, and step into living your most powerful truth. And I really want to encourage you to step out and step up and step into living your most powerful truth today. Yes, today, National Coming Out Day, because there's no better time than finally to declare this is who I am. In fact, to kind of help you along with this, I brought someone to the show today to help you really find your voice, to help you take that stand, and to help you be your most heroic self when you say the words, I'm gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender. Now, I didn't just bring anybody to do this show with me. In fact, I brought somebody who's helped me tremendously in finding my voice. And her name is Amy Mead, and she's the co-founder and director of training for this little thing called Heroic Public Speaking that I attended. But that isn't where she started. In fact, after she earned her MFA in acting from the Yale School of Drama, she spent years acting professionally in theaters such as Seattle Repertory, Oregon Shakespeare, and the Yale Rep, and she worked consistently in commercials. Amy's assisted the speech faculty at Yale Drama, taught acting in multiple sessions at Northwestern University, and has spent the last 15 years mentoring teachers and speakers and bringing the hard skills of performance to their craft. Now, before we dive in, I want to make sure you all understand. We are not insinuating that coming out of the closet is a performance. But what I can tell you, it will be one of the moments in your life where you feel like you are on the biggest stage in the world. Welcome to the show, my friend Amy Mead.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Rick.
Oh, thank you. And when I first talked to you about this, I was like, this will be a really great way to kind of bring the worlds of acting and performance together and learn some of the breathing techniques and things such that you may really need these when you start to have those difficult conversations with those that you care about most about your sexual orientation. So let's kind of talk about what actors go through. They kind of go through this same coming out in their own way, don't they?
Well, I think all performers do.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you are getting on stage and playing a character that someone else has written, or on film playing a character that someone else has written, or you are choosing to be most fully you.
Right.
And the various roles that we play in our lives can look like many different things. There's so many different aspects to us. But there's that moment before we step out on the stage or before we fully step into ourselves that can be nerve-wracking because it is not familiar, right? So whether that's another character and you're going to be on stage and expect to be judged, or whether that's in our own lives where it's very interesting. So often we expect to be judged simply because we are judging ourselves. We expect to be criticized because we may be critical of ourselves or sometimes critical of others. So that's the world we are accustomed to. And it is that moment of authenticity that is so unfamiliar that wreaks such havoc on our hearts and causes such fear. Of course, like I tell my kids all the time, when you're fearful of something, whether it's a monster under the bed or going to sleep at night or whatever it may be, the only way through it is through it.
Right.
And any of us who have been through any major life changes know that the only way through it is through it.
Well, and I think this is a key point, is there's the door. There's the closet door, whether it's metaphorical or whatever it is.
Sure.
It represents that fear. And you're never going to know what it's like on the other side until you walk through it. And it is scary because you're so spot on. And I love this is where we started this today. The unfamiliar is unfamiliar. There's no other way to say it. I mean, if it was familiar, there wouldn't be a problem. We wouldn't be doing all this, But
it's why the first thing of anything is hard. The first time of anything is hard, whether it's saying I love you, or it's saying I'm leaving, or it's saying the first lines in a play. The first time is always hard. And then it becomes familiar from that point.
And I think part of the reason I really wanted to like bring this show to the listeners was because there is some prep work we do. There are some lines we run on how we're going to say these things. In fact, that's one of the exercises I have my clients go through when we're working on, okay, the moment, the day is coming. We don't know yet when it is, but it's going to happen. Most times there is not some specific day, not like the opening of a show, but sometimes there is. Sometimes they line up that event on, okay, we're going to do it on this day because I know everybody will be around and I can get it taken care of. But this isn't about let's rehearse so much, even though there is some little bit of rehearsing. It's about more getting comfortable in the discomfort. And I think for actors, they have to do that a lot, don't they?
That's something that my partner, Michael Port, and I teach on a lot. And it's something that was reinforced time and time again when I was at Yale and in every acting job I had afterwards. How do we get comfortable with being uncomfortable? And this idea that as a performer, we are absolutely naked on the stage.
Yep.
Whether that's literal or not, we are naked when we are on the stage. And when we step into our truth, if we haven't been living in our truth, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. We make ourselves naked. We make ourselves vulnerable. And I think that the difference is that if we can shift the idea of vulnerability from being a weakness into being the real core of our strength, then there's great freedom in that.
There's huge freedom in that.
To stand on a stage as a public speaker and say what we really believe in, to stand with our loved ones and say, this is who I really am, that is incredibly vulnerable. But not only does it show us our strength when we do that, it also invites other people around us to be strong in the same ways, to allow themselves to be seen, to allow themselves to be heard. And there's a huge gift, I believe, in stepping into the wholeness and fullness of who each of us really is and speaking from that voice rather than what we think others want us to be.
Well, and this is part of the big shift in coming out, is we shift from being who others want us to be to being ourselves. And I don't know if people really can see that until they hear those words. You're shifting from being who people want you to be being yourself. Now, we're putting this in the framework of coming out in your sexual orientation, but this could be coming out in, I no longer want to be the CEO of a company. This could come in, I no longer want to be in this relationship. It could come from, I just really don't want to keep trying to become a parent when all signs say you're not to bear children. The conversations we're having here, and this is why the Coming Out Lounge is starting to spread its wings, so to speak, is to keep bringing these different stories into focus so that you can see the vulnerability truly is your strength when you take that step. Yes, you're naked on the stage, but you're only as naked as you want to make yourself feel. That's kind of my theory.
That's so beautifully put. That's so beautifully put. I just see such beauty in it, Rick. Whether it is a career change or a relationship change or the change of coming out, that when we become unafraid to be fully who we are with other people, it also opens up a doorway for us to get to know ourselves more fully. And speaking in the realm of public speaking now and performance, which of course is what I do and how I work with people primarily, we often say that self-expression, the ability to be fully self-expressed in the world, to be fully who we are, comes from self-knowledge, that the self-knowledge comes first. It's so easy if we're not fully ourselves with other people to not be fully ourselves with ourselves.
Yep. Well, your partner Michael
Which
Port
shuts down the ability to grow.
It does. Yeah. And your partner Michael says something, and this is from his book, Yourself Solid Mentoring, but he says, whatever is happening in our business is a direct reflection of what's happening in our personal life, and whatever's happening in our personal life is a direct reflection. The reason I bring that up is, first of all, it's a great observation, but it's also something you cannot separate your coming out from anything and everything in your life. It's all going to be touched by it. And especially, as you said, as we stand in these vulnerable spaces, whether it's on a stage or in front of 2 or 3 family members that we're about to say something to, nothing can be separated out. As much as we would like to, okay, let's go do the coming out thing over here, and then we'll come back to regular life. No, it doesn't happen that way. It just doesn't happen. And I speak the truth in this one, that Amy really helped me start to get really naked on stage over the last year and a half. I have a good story to tell, and I'm a dynamic speaker, and I'm not saying that from an egoic space. I know where my talents are. But there's something to be said when you grab hold and you embrace and you trust your vulnerability. Whether
Absolutely.
it's
and I remember.
or personally, it was huge. And I got to tell you, Amy's one of the people who really saw Rick sweat immensely. But why don't you talk about what you saw from that perspective? Because I think it's going to line up so nicely for those who are like standing, shaking at the door with their hand on the handle, just wanting to pull that door open.
Yeah. Well, Rick, I remember so clearly one moment working with you on one of your performances, and there being a moment where you stopped telling the story the way you thought it should be told. Yep. And what happened in that moment was a pause. Mm-hmm. There was a silence. There was a moment where you allowed us just to see you without any words. Mm-hmm. And then you said a very crucial line,
yep,
which I'm going to paraphrase, but it was to the extent of, and in that moment,
I'll say
I fell, do it.
And in that moment, it was the first time that there was no sex. I fell apart, and I fell in love.
That was the moment that broke the hearts of every single person sitting in that audience.
And for those of you listening, this was literally my coming out. It's the crux of my coming out. It's the moment that everything shifted. In fact, in that moment, 48 hours later, I came home from being in London and was naked on a stage, a huge stage, in front of my wife and my 2 little girls, and said, I can no longer be this. This is who I am. Mm-hmm. And in those moments, you don't know exactly how it's going to play out. But what you do know is, and I've learned this throughout all these journeys and talking and speaking, and even this podcast right now is it's always a vulnerable moment. I don't know what's going to happen with the guest. I don't know if I'm going to get, not that this would happen, but I don't know if Amy's going to come on and go, yes, I'll just answer questions. Yes, I'll just answer questions. I know that wouldn't happen because that's not who we are, but you don't know what's going to happen. And so you got to just kind of be in the moments, and just release.
Yeah. But what came out of your mouth in that moment was pure poetry. I mean, that's one of those things that when we're working on content with people and we're sculpting the content and looking for, okay, well, where's the poetry in it? Mm-hmm. That it just came streaming out of your mouth because there was so much heart there. Yeah. That line of, I fell apart and I fell in love. I mean, there's that contrast of things falling apart and things coming so perfectly together at the same time.
You know what's interesting?
That moment of poetry.
That I hadn't seen this metaphor until I was actually doing that speech. I think it was right before school ended this last spring at a college. And it's kind of been interesting that each time I get up to talk and tell it, I get more stage time with this particular group because they're like, we want Rick to do what Rick does. And I was coming right to that point, not as if it's like completely rehearsed. There's a beautiful flow that when you get comfortable in who you are and how you're going to show up in doing this, the words just kind of come out of your mouth. And as I started to come to that point, I paused even more because what happened was I realized the 2 phrases after there was no sex, that I fell in love and I fell apart, that had always been very outward, focused on the guy that I had met. Mm-hmm. But in that moment, I realized how much I fell in love with myself.
Yes.
And I fell apart simultaneously. And we're talking a year and a half later that line was actually came out of Rick's mouth. And now, here we are. That was the first time that connected me, and it brought a whole different feel to it. And the reason I'm sharing this with listeners is this is what it means about getting really clear with yourself. I'm not asking you to rehearse lines about how you're going to tell somebody you're coming out. But when you can get really clear with yourself about why this is important for you, it's no different than why being on the stage is important for an actor, or why delivering that line in just the right way is important for a speech. It's because there's some piece of you that's completely aligned with it.
Rick, I firmly believe that there are things that each of us are meant to do.
Yep.
And what I see for so many people over time is that whether it's a career or it's a way of being, that often when we're young we connect to it, and then as we build our lives and our careers, it's easy to get away from what is that thing that I am here to do? What is that thing that I am meant to do? Why am I here?
Yeah.
And in my case, I left the world of performance for close to 15 years. And people would ask me all the time, do you miss acting? Do you miss acting? And I'd say, no, I really don't. I've moved on, and I didn't feel that I missed acting. It wasn't until I got directly back into coaching people on performance in a different way. I mean, I was working with people all along the way on how they presented, but on direct performance, in this case, public speaking, where you're a playwright at the same time as you are a performer.
Right.
That all of a sudden I went, oh my gosh, I've missed this. Oh my goodness. Like, this is, how did I forget what I was here to do? And I'm getting teary, but there are those moments when we step into our truth and we fully live in our truth that can illuminate for us our purpose, that can illuminate for us, oh, this is who I really am. And there are so many of us live for whole chapters of our lives doing fine. Doing fine. Life is good.
Yeah, moving
build
along.
Family if you're going to build family, have career, it's all good. But there are those huge aha moments, like a curtain going up, where we go, oh, here I am.
Yeah.
Here I am. I lost track a little bit of the fullness of who I am, or the light of who I am, or the power at the core of who I am.
Yeah.
And it's when we step into that again that it can feel like that simultaneous experience of falling in love and falling apart.
Exactly.
Because it can have a touch of, oh, where have I been all along? Yeah. What was I doing? How many years was I? And the thing is, you can't blame yourself, right? It's a good friend of mine sometimes says, Amy, you can't blame the toddler for still being in diapers once he gets out. We can't look back on ourselves and say, well, why wasn't I this evolved then?
Yeah. That's a really interesting place, because this is something that used to get under my skin. And actually, the first time it really got under my skin, and it was actually probably one of my truly best performances that I've ever done, was right after I became a coach, and I started getting success pretty quickly and being known for what I did as the coming out coach. I was on the Ricky Lake show, and they had me on as the coming out expert. And there were 3 people that I was working with on stage, and one of the persons happened to be a guy who is still married to his wife, who's chosen to stay in the marriage, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, they tell my story that I came out late in life. And so there are a few people that kind of got up on their high horses about this. And they started saying, well, I can't believe you did this and you didn't know, and da-da-da-da-da. That was just mean what you did to that woman, so on and so forth. And that used to really get under my skin. And then one day, and it's interesting that you just said it, one day the person that I was talking to I could tell was getting under their skin. I said, well, here's the thing. Sometimes you just go build life because you think this is exactly the life you're supposed to be building, and then one day you wake up and you realize you completely got away and lost yourself. And I think whether you're coming out of the closet or you're listening to this and you're coming out of some struggle, I'd really invite you to take Amy's words and go, what have you been building in your life that you completely have gotten away from? That's really the real you. Because is it simple and easy to make that declaration and then to go, okay, now I'm going to go step through the fire. No. But I can tell you this, it's a lot simpler and easier than starting to live with the false self for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. And I think this is where the vulnerability of acting and stuff comes forward. This is why I think actors are so good, is they tap into these sort of feelings and they get to the heart of it. And when you see that performance, it's like, okay, I really get you. And I would say that for most of us who go through the closet doors, and I'm just speaking, just coming out, if you can stand in the place of love, and your thought is, I just want you to really see me, the real me. There's no hate, there's no right or wrong, just if you can stand in that loving space of, I love you and I need you to really see me so I can really be with you. Trust me, it's going to be much easier to deliver those lines. Not because they're scripted, but because you're coming from the heart, deep from the heart. So let's kind of change gears, because that's what we do to make the performances really great, right?
Yeah.
One of the things I really wanted to do on this was, there's some beautiful breathing techniques that you trained us all on. And I thought the other day, some of these would be awesome to give people who are about to make those really big, bold choices of telling people that they're gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, whatever it may be. And often we just dive right in. It's like, no, okay, so here's another little secret about Amy. She's also a yoga instructor. So this is coming from a place of real knowledge and knowing just how to do this. But I'd love for you to share a couple of let's get centered breathing techniques, so that right before you do this big reveal, the curtain goes up, you're at least a little more centered than you would be if you just dove in, so to speak. So it's all yours.
Absolutely. Well, I have to say, it's, sometimes I look back at the different chapters I've had and go, oh, well, that's interesting. I taught yoga and I taught meditation for 15 years. And if that wasn't what I was supposed to be doing, if it was more in this performance arena, I sure did pick something good to be doing for 15 years, because it's been so influential for me.
Well, and they all interconnect, though, too. Right. They all connect. I mean, I have friends who've come out and they go, I don't know why this just didn't happen sooner. And so then if they're coaching or even if they're just friends, I go, well, let's go connect some dots. And by the time I'm done helping them connect the dots, they're like, okay, this all makes sense. This makes complete sense why I went there. But so cool. So yoga
I do think
instructor,
we have to go through the chapters that we go through to get where we need to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, okay, so breathing. What would be a couple of good breath exercises that we can share with people that they'll kind of remember?
Absolutely. So let's start really simply, because we're working just with audio here. Take your hands, everybody, and just put them on your side ribs. So for some of you, that's going to mean right hand on the right ribs and left hand on the left ribs. And for some of you, it'll feel better to cross the arms in front of you and put your hands on the opposite ribs, kind of like you're wrapping your arms around yourself. And squeeze in with your hands, so that it's like you give yourself a bit of a hug. Squeeze in with your hands, and now breathe in a really deep breath and expand the rib cage into the hands. And with the hands compressed to send the breath out. So we'll do that a few more times. So squeeze with the hands. You provide resistance from the outside, and breathe in to that resistance. Because God knows we all meet resistance, inside and outside, all the time. And to exhale. So stay with that. Provide a little more resistance with the hands than you think you need, so that you can really feel your ribcage expand into the hands and really feel it compress. So often, while you're doing that, I'm just going to talk to you all for a moment here. We use about 1/6 of our lung capacity in day-to-day walking, breathing life. 1/6. It's so little of our capacity. And then when we get stressed or we're anxious or we're about to do something big in our lives, we use even less. And so we start to, from the inside out, create this kind of fight or flight response, like a panic attack. We create our own anxiety by breathing less. So I'm giving you this simple exercise as a way to get in touch with a really deep, grounded breath. So let the hands go now. And just notice for a second, can you still feel yourself getting larger when you breathe in And can you still feel yourself really fully breathing out? Breath is such an interesting metaphor because, we got to do it, right? Can't survive without it. But it is quite literally a taking in of something new in every moment and a letting go of something toxic that we don't need in every single moment.
I love that. So powerful because, boy, you delivered like the exercise, but then you even delivered the metaphor that really ties to this all. That breath in, just as we start to say what we are, is the breathing in the new and letting go of the old. And
that's right.
It's so powerful, so very powerful. So one of the things that I know comes up when we've done the speaking stuff, and I wish we had a whole hour to just kind of go on this, but we're getting close to the end here. But one of the things I know that you have really helped a lot of people with is nervousness. And God knows nervousness is like the thing that's probably causing the closet door to rattle, so to speak. But if somebody's really, really nervous, other than doing some of this breath technique sort of thing, as an actor, how did you learn to kind of let go of the nervousness?
Well, I'll give you two things. One, it is rehearsal. The more prepared we are, the more times we have actually run through it out loud, the easier and easier it gets. And you know this from your experience. It's one thing to first talk to your wife and your girls, and then after that it gets easier.
Yep.
Every single time you say it until it's the thing you love to say.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So rehearsing it, I don't know. I haven't had that direct experience, but for any performer, it's the rehearsing of it that allows us to feel more and more confident. Now, part of the key of rehearsal, one of the keys of rehearsal, is that it isn't about doing it the exact same way every time, but about getting so comfortable with the words, getting so comfortable with the emotions that rise up when we say the words, that when we go to actually do it for real, we can just forget all of the rehearsal and let whatever happens in the moment happen in the moment. And the muscle memory takes over in some way. So that's my first suggestion, is to see how that can apply to you here. For those of you who are at that juncture, at that place, see in what way that could be applicable for you. The second is this. So many of the experiences and emotions that we have in our lives are just one blink of an eye away from a reframe, from being something positive. What if you are not terrified? What if you are actually excited? What if you are not so anxious as you are, feel yourself standing on the brink of something phenomenal? Can we, almost like it's a little bit of a hologram, can we shift our view of what we're about to step into from the negative to the extraordinary?
Absolutely.
And that's a very helpful way, in my experience, to deal with fear. Yeah. I may be on the brink of letting go of something, and there may be fear and loss for me in that. But I may be on that same brink in that same moment,
right,
stepping into full truth, full life, full self-expression. It's that moment you coined. Yeah. I fell apart, and I fell in love. Yeah. It's the blink of an eye that separates the two. It is the
blink of an eye. One of the things I say when I'm working with clients is you're going to feel like you are hanging on the edge of the cliff. The fingertips are all that's holding you there. But in the other way of looking at it, you're about to let go and let the magic happen.
You're about to be free.
You're about to be free. And it's such a huge thing. In fact, I know as you were talking about the rehearsal and stuff, some of the things I've encouraged clients to do is, you do practice what you might say. Not line by line, but get comfortable with saying the words. I love myself enough that I need to share this with you that I'm gay. Or I know this is going to probably surprise you, but it may not. I mean, you've got to start putting in different frameworks, because to some people, believe it or not, some of your friends are going to say, yeah, we know, we were just waiting for you to finally get around to telling us. Others are going to react differently. But when I talk about rehearsal and getting ready for this, I actually encourage my clients to write 10 different scenarios. 10 different things that may be going on. You may be sitting at a bar and suddenly you got just enough liquid courage in you that your best friend, you're just going to tell him what's going on. You may be sitting quietly in the living room looking at your spouse, or maybe you're with your parents, and the moment just strikes and it feels right. This is what Amy and I mean by this rehearsal piece. Get comfortable with just everything about who you're about to step into.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So
that's beautiful.
We're wrapping up here, but one of the things I always ask, and the listeners know, is what kind of advice would a guest give someone if they were sitting right across from them, looking at them? And I know Amy could give hours of advice in her world and mine, and but I'd love to know something that you'd really like to just leave the listeners with before we give them information how to, work with you or talk to you or whatever it may be. What would be that piece of advice you'd love to give the listeners?
It's something I thought about before we recorded. Mm-hmm. And what seems important now is something very different than what I thought I would say. What I thought I would say was, choose early and often, mm-hmm. which is a phrase we use in the performance world all the time. Make the choice, go for it, don't hold yourself back. But what is occurring to me in the moment, which of course I have to go with because I'm a performer and I train performers, is just to be fearless, to let go of the ideas of who you think you should be. Let go of anyone else's approval. Let go of the idea that you have to be somebody other than who you fully are, because it is glorious. It is fucking glorious, pardon me, on the other side. On the other side. And so the fear that holds you back, shuck it off like somebody else's jeans. Like you're wearing the wrong pair of pants. Just shuck it off.
I so agree. And for the listeners, I want you to really get this, that fearless can be how you define it. It can be that thing that whatever gets you to the place that makes you feel next, and listen to what I'm going to say here, next most comfortable. It doesn't have to be, okay, I'm out and I'm waving the rainbow flag. No, it moves you to the place that you next feel most comfortable. And I love that Amy brought up this fearless piece because it is fucking huge, to agree with you there. So if anybody wanted to get to know more about you or about this stuff, I mean, I know I could go on and I could give all this information, but I'd like to hear it from you. Well, how could they be in touch with you, do some work with you if they ever, especially if they're interested in anything, opening up, learning how to speak, learning how to act, any of this sort of stuff? How can they get a hold of you, Amy?
Well, you can see some of what we do at heroicpublicspeaking.com.
Yeah.
It's Heroic Public Speaking. And I also want to encourage you. There's a book out there that my partner, Michael Port, who we've referenced several times, has written, and it will have just been released when this podcast is released. It's called Steal the Show. Yeah. From speeches to job interviews to deal closing pitches, how to guarantee a standing ovation for all the performances in your life. And it's really not just about public speaking. It's about how we perform when the spotlight is on us, how we respond in those high stakes moments of our lives. And for your listeners, Rick, I would really suggest picking up this book and giving it a read. Spend some time with it because it has so much of what we teach in there, and also because we know what those spotlight moments are like, and they are the moments that so often define the quality of our life. And it matters. It
does matter. And I want you to make sure everybody heard what Amy just said. It's those spotlight moments that define the quality of our life. Well, Amy, I don't really have to say this, but this has been a really, really special podcast for me.
Rick, it's a tremendous honor for me, and I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to speak with you, especially for an episode for this very big, delightful day.
Yeah,
and I'm very honored.
And I can tell you a lot of what you're hearing and what I do and how I do my podcast and how I just seem to really just control this whole thing as if I just woke up and said, okay, let's do it. A lot of it has to do with because I found my voice and I found my way to not only become myself and my truest self as a gay man, but I also found my heroic public speaking voice so that I could give back to the people who need it most. So
Yes,
thank you,
you did.
Amy.
And
yeah, it's great. So
we
anything
say
else?
save the world one speech at a time, and if
Yeah.
you're not saving the world, I don't know who is, Rick. So
Well,
thank you.
so much. And if you've enjoyed what you've heard today and you want to connect with either Amy or I, just hop on the show page when you get there to listen to this. You'll see all sorts of ways to connect with Amy. And of course, as usual, we always like love. Everybody likes love. So if this really moved you, especially on National Coming Out Day, let us know. To give us a rating or a review wherever you've downloaded this from. We'd love to hear from you. As always, you can do the metaphorical hookup with me at the Coming Out Coach on Facebook. And if you're a little tweet that likes to just Twitter off your head all the time, then hit me up over at Rick Clemens on Twitter, and the hashtag for the show is the Coming Out Lounge. And you know what? I usually say go out there, step out, step up, step into living your most powerful truth. But today I think it's more appropriate to say go out there and find your most heroic voice for you in your life. I'm Rick Clemens, the host of the Coming Out Lounge, and we will catch you 1 week from today. Have a great National Coming Out Day, everyone. Take care.
You've just experienced the Coming Out Lounge. Go online to www.comingoutlounge.com to learn more, and tune in again next week for more stories and tips for being true to yourself.